that's it. Let's have fun. We're going to welcome our lived experience panel up to the stage now, and that is going to be facilitated by Haley Moss.
It's like these mics assume we're all taller than we are. Give y'all a second to get settled in. Okay. Good morning, y'all. It's so wonderful to be here, and I want to welcome you whether you are joining us today in person or virtually. This is our lived experience panel, and I'm so excited because so often when we talk about autism, we tend to forget that there are adults in the first place. And as you heard with the prevalence rates, we tend to talk about children. And we also sometimes let the voices of autistic people go unheard and ignored. So it really is my absolute privilege to get to be here today and to help moderate and uplift the voices of autistic people with lived experience. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Haley Moss. I am an attorney, an author, an advocate, and I am proudly autistic. It is my absolute honor to have these four wonderful panelists with us today. Together, we can welcome Marita, Em, Mark, and Stephen, who will be sharing their experiences as autistic people. Self-advocacy historically has been an incredibly important part of civil rights and self-determination for people with disabilities. Additionally, self-advocacy is something that's often required to access appropriate services and supports at the individual level, as well as on a broader scale. These incredible panelists will talk about self-advocacy from high school well into adulthood through individualized support, self-determination, and person-centered planning. We will learn and hear about different resources and strategies that will help intentionally teach and support self-advocacy. So with that, I'm excited to get to welcome each of our panelists to the stage, and we're going to have a little bit of time for you to get to know them as well before we really get our discussion kick-started. So I'm just going to start from this side. So I'm going to start with Em, and we're just going to go down the line. If each of you would feel comfortable introducing yourself to our fantastic audience, and a little bit about your journey with autism, including when you were diagnosed and how autism has impacted you.
So hi, I'm Em Nakamura. I am a first-year graduate student in the College Student Personnel Administration program. And I'm currently 23. I was diagnosed when I was about 14. And it took me a while to get diagnosed, mainly because I love my parents, but they were, especially my dad, was of a kind of if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. So I didn't actually get diagnosed until I started struggling in school and needed accommodations. So yeah, that I kind of knew from early on though, just because I had several cousins who were autistic as well. And yeah, it was just kind of an open secret in the family. But when I got diagnosed, it helped me get the proper accommodations I needed and helped me advocate for myself a little better. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Hoffman, and I am a senior sales executive for a career. And I figured out that I was autistic and I was diagnosed when I was 42, and I really figured it out when I was 41 just kind of by doing internet research, which is something that I like to do. It's kind of a hobby of mine. And being diagnosed has impacted me in actually a really positive way. It's kind of explained things that were hard for me to understand before, like why I felt awkward in groups, why I really didn't have friends, and why I always felt like kind of an outsider in groups. And that's pretty much the history on that. So thank you all so much for coming, and I appreciate you coming to listen and helping everyone that you help. It really means a lot.
Hello, my name's Steven Dema. I'm a senior at Illinois State University studying data science and computational mathematics. I was diagnosed about 2 to 3 years ago, right before my sophomore year of college. Most of my life, I knew that there was something different about me, but I didn't really know what it was. For my late diagnosis, it was mainly because I was trying to figure out like why I was different than most people, and it has just led to people understanding more about who I am and why my friends can help me in the best ways possible. And I just thank you for all being here and learning all about our stories.
My name is Marita Landreth. I currently work for McLean County in their Behavioral Health Coordination Department, and I'm also a nurse. I'm 37 now. I got parts. I've been nervous about sharing it, but I talked to my therapist, and I'm actually one of the folks who is kind of partially self-diagnosed. I got ADHD and social communication disorder as formal diagnoses about 4 years ago. Since then, and having treated my ADHD, I've noticed a little bit more of those autism characteristics, and the therapist that I see now, who is an LCSW, said that if I wanted the fancy paper that says autism, that he would give it to me. So what I'm also hoping to be able to bring today is you guys all know folks who don't have that diagnosis yet, or maybe will choose for various reasons not to get that diagnosis, and just talking about remaining curious, because those needs and those accommodations, there's ways that we can reach that support out to people when they might not be able to get that diagnosis for one reason or another.
Thank you all for sharing a little bit about your stories. And it's really interesting that we are having these types of conversations about self-advocacy, and especially since almost all of you mentioned getting diagnosed a little bit later than early childhood, which I find I was someone who was diagnosed in early childhood, so I have a very different experience than our panelists likely do. And we're talking about self-advocacy today, which is why this is so fascinating as well. And that's something that's really important. So I'm going to ask all of our panelists to share a little bit about how they've developed these self-advocacy skills over time, given their lived experiences, and what accommodations and support services, if any, have been helpful for you. And whoever wants to get us started, that's totally fine. I'm not going to pick on anybody. This isn't the Socratic method in law school.
I guess I can get started. So with self-advocacy, a lot of it was kind of built up first by my parents advocating for me when I was younger. I was kind of very, I had a lot of communication skills, and it was difficult for me to really advocate for myself when I was like in high school, for example, when I first got diagnosed. And so I had the support of my parents, and they continued basically up to like right before my freshman year of college. And that was where my dad took me to my first accommodations office meeting before the semester had started. And that was the last time I really had my parents have to advocate for me. But I think having those like stepping stones of working with my parents on advocating for myself really helped. And as for accommodations and support services, I really benefited from one of the things I had in college was priority registration in undergrad. Basically, I just was able to register ahead of other students, and it helped me keep my schedules together so that I didn't have to like change up my schedule too much ever. And yeah, I also had accommodations like, like having earbuds in when it's like a time that isn't lecturing, just because I couldn't really do like free work with the noises of other students talking. So yeah, things like that, kind of the generic accommodations, but those did really help me.
So for self-advocacy, I would say that it was really hard for me to start because looking back historically, like when I waited tables, which is something you would think someone with autism would have a really hard time doing, I was dating my now wife, and I would spend probably 40 to 50% of the time in the bathroom in the back, just texting her, just thinking that that was normal, just avoiding work, when in reality, I was avoiding all the stressors that were happening when I was there. And not knowing I had autism at the time, it was really hard because people are just like, Mark's lazy, he's not running food. And that carried on throughout those times. And after finding out I had autism, I was in a role when I was between the ages of 42 and up until about 7 months ago, the job I was at, it was really hard to self-advocate there, and I didn't feel comfortable telling anyone I had autism because they weren't really supportive individuals at that place. And I really, when I got the role where I'm at now, and I work for a company called Siemens, if you're familiar with that, they are fantastic. And I told my manager, and as soon as I told her, she said, anytime you need anything, let me know. And the great thing about this role is I work from home, I would say 95% of the time. So I'm able to take breaks, step away. And after being diagnosed, it was much easier for my family, my kids, my wife to understand why I was the way that I was. And they respect a lot more. So I use headphones when I need to. I take a break. I can go up to my room and relax. It's really just more understanding that I need different care than other people. Like all humans need care, but I just need it differently. And I stand up for myself and I set boundaries and I just make sure that I'm taken care of so that I can take care of the people that I love the most, which they deserve the best me, and that's how to get the best me.
My self advocacy didn't really start until I started coming to college. For most of my life, it was usually somebody as my mom or teachers or friends just trying to push me to do the best that I could. That didn't change until I came to college, where you're kind of living on your own. You have to force yourself to go get breakfast every morning. You have to go do laundry by yourself, and it's not your mom telling you when to go do it. So that's kind of when all my self-advocacy started, and it led more into like the classrooms of me feeling okay going to talk to teachers and be like, I'm struggling. How can we fix this? And that kind of just led to more of self-advocacy with my friends and telling my friends about how they could best support me. And most of them now know that 99% of the time I wear headphones. Like this is one of the odd moments that I'm not. And there's always the moment of I'll have one headphone on, one headphone off, and that's when people can come and talk to me. If both of them are on, don't come talk to me. I'm actually trying to do work. And just everybody has been super supportive, and most of my friends have found ways to get me out of my slumps and approach me in different ways that they know are best for me.
Self-advocacy as an adult can be tricky, especially if you were working your way into the workforce. It can be sometimes you'll come and you might not even. It doesn't feel good to feel forced to self-disclose something, and so asking for accommodations is hard a lot of times. For me, what has been most useful is just having patience with myself and not necessarily needing a why. Sometimes when I'm asking for something, I want to over-explain why, and kind of letting go of that a little bit. One of the first things that kind of got me started on my journey of looking into some sort of diagnosis was when I was experiencing depression. It just didn't feel, it felt like more depression secondary to something as opposed to just plain old depression. And a lot of the things that my holistic friends who were experiencing depression, the things that would work for them were not working for me. Which, knowing now, I was probably more likely experiencing autistic burnout with a little bit of sprinkle of depression as opposed to maybe more traditional depression. Because things like going out or getting a massage, like it ended up being too much additional stimulation, and it ended up making things worse. So having that limited but important kind of hibernation time, and accepting that, and even if I didn't exactly understood why something worked for me, just understanding that and not feeling like I had to explain myself. Which means having friends who are going to understand and aren't going to require explanation is important. And you can't always necessarily get that from work. Sometimes you'll get, you'll hear like, yes, whatever you need. And then you actually, your disability is actually disabling you. And then when you ask for those things, there's lots of additional follow-up questions, which can be hard and sometimes feel a little disruptive.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I think this kind of goes to show that self advocacy really does encompass a whole range of different experiences, whether you are a student, a young person, a family member, or a full fledged adult with a family, a job, and all of that. So I want to switch gears just a little bit because there's a couple of things that our panelists did touch on, such as when Mark mentioned the being a waiter story and how it was just exhausting. I was like, wow, that's kind of what masking feels like, is you have this persona. So if any of you have ever worked in customer service or waited tables, I always say that's kind of what masking feels like for the neurotypicals in the room, is because you're always smiling and people are doing things that make you just go, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Why? And you have to smile and act like everything's fine. And then you come home and scream into the void. Like if you've ever had that experience as a neurotypical holistic person, try having that 24/7. So we are going to talk a little bit about masking. That's just the best explanation I could give if this is something that might be unfamiliar to you. And I want to ask Marita to share a little bit about your experience with masking and how that has impacted your life and relationships, and how do you navigate this part and understanding of your neurodivergent identity?
We started kind of mentioning it when we noticed the difference in the identification of autism traits in folks identifying as male as opposed to female presenting folks. But socially, the requirements for women are different in our society, and it's one of the reasons women are expected to have a certain a sort of people-pleasing demeanor at the end of the day. And I think it's easily one of the reasons why autism is less readily identified in women than it is in men. I am a nurse, and I kind of stumbled into the career. I was interested in the sciences. My dad is in healthcare, and so it was kind of something for me to connect with him, and I was very good at it, but it's 100% focusing on one person and their needs and adjusting to what their stuff is. And I'm in behavioral health now, which means that the nursing work that I've been doing is very that person focused, and it's been very rewarding, but it's exhausting. And I think that if I had known about my autism earlier and maybe understood myself a little bit differently, I wouldn't be in the relative state of burnout that I think that I'm in now. I am happy in my job, but my long-term plan is to get out of nursing and into something a little less people-focused. I do think that there's plenty of autistic people who are nursing and don't know it, and plenty that also do know it. And I do think that there's a healthy way to be a nurse and be autistic. I'm not convinced that there's a healthy way for me to be a nurse and be autistic at the same time yet. That might be different later down the road, but masking over a long term has a huge impact on mental health and endurance because it's a lot of work. It's more than just, obviously, everyone in the world has to put on kind of different hats, and you've got your kind of work self and your home self, but it's a lot of extra effort when you're autistic, for sure.
And kind of to follow up on that, you mentioned something really profound about how masking impacts you in your career and your life. How do you take care of yourself when all of this is going on and these types of burnouts are happening? Because autistic burnout is the actual worst.
It's terrible. I happen to have a very, very accommodating job. So if I have a very, very rough day and I need to call it, I'm able to do that. I'm also the way that I practice nursing is different comparative to like being in a hospital or a clinic where I have a team. I'm the only nurse on the team, but I work with case managers and therapists. So under most circumstances, if I'm leaving, usually things can be handled, which is pretty nice. Remind me of the question again. I was going on a train.
Oh,
and
no
I
worries,
lost
no
the
worries. And
train.
how do you take care of yourself when all of this is going on?
Yes,
Like,
yes,
how do we
yes.
make ourselves feel better and safely unmask and all that good stuff?
Luckily for me, or maybe not, maybe it's a bad thing, but a lot of the folks that are in our program for seriously mentally ill people who have frequent interactions, with the justice system and or the homeless shelters and or emergency services are also autistic, as it turns out. And so what that means is I can be honest about where I'm at and that I need a little bit of a break, and it's not them, it's me. Let's take a break if something is a little bit too much. I also have a team, so I can tap people in and out, which is really important. Sometimes it means like I have, these are little loop earplugs I have attached to my glasses. So if I just need a little bit less stimulation, I can use those. And that's not only helping me, but it's also modeling, self-advocating for myself to my clients, which is nice.
I just learned something and I'm like, that is a genius thing that you could just tune out people without needing music.
Yes.
See, this is why you need to spend time with more autistic people in your life. And even if you're an autistic person yourself, you learn some new life hack from your new friends and you're like, how did I not know this? You cannot imagine the amount of stuff that we learn from each other. And I think having that community is something that is worth mentioning. But that's a little bit of my own tangent. Kind of going back to where we were talking about burnout. And my next question is for Em to share a little bit about your experience with that and how you navigate burnout while also balancing those ridiculous demands of graduate school and other responsibilities.
Yeah, so I think another piece of information needed for context is that I'm a type 1 diabetic and I was diagnosed very recently within the last year. And so diabetic burnout kind of plays into autistic burnout and they kind of loop around each other a lot of the time in ways that can make things very difficult because I not only am I having to mask most of my day, but I'm also constantly having to stab myself in the leg to be able to eat food. So that's always a challenge balancing all that stuff. I was diagnosed a little bit before starting grad school. So yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I know at least one other person in this crowd knows how demanding my program is. But basically, I feel like a lot of my support comes from my support network, like my sorry, I'm stuttering a bit. My strategies kind of involve working with other people in my life who are either on the spectrum or understand aspects of that to really figure out like you were saying, learning from other individuals about strategies to cope. Personally, I think having an amount of people that I can at least partially unmask around is definitely helps me out because then I don't always feel like I need to be like masking in every social situation. So I try to make most of my social situations at the very least accommodating to neurodivergency. So like a lot of my friends are either also neurodivergent or are like have like a personal close family member or a partner that's on the spectrum or like neurodivergent. And so having social situations that normalize autism symptoms can be really helpful. I also like writing. I'm a writer, and so writing has helped me whenever I've been really like emotionally challenged to get out my feelings in a way that is productive, but still like giving myself some grace. So yeah, I feel like I also benefit from having a boss. So my bosses are very understanding of me. My primary supervisor, I remember one time I texted her, I was like, hey, I had a little bit of a breakdown in the office. I'm gonna have to submit this thing to you like maybe an hour or two later than I said I would. And she was like, no worries, just take care of yourself. So again, like an accommodating workplace really helped me, really helps me with my stress when I have a lot of these things piling up on me. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to talk a little bit about the school experience, kind of, switching gears with our panelists. And my next question is actually for Mark. And as someone who was diagnosed later in life, it's probably affected your perception of yourself and even the experiences you had growing up. And when you reflect back on your life, you might have had some kind of moment or something that you're like, this all makes sense. And looking back at your experiences as a young person during school, do you think that if others around you knew that you were on the spectrum, such as your teachers, family members, peers, that could have changed your experience in school?
That's a really good question. First of all, I want to say that seeing all of you here and knowing that you're here for the betterment of your students is amazing. I went to school through junior high, grade school, before this was really accepted. I think if my teachers would have known that I had autism when I was in grade school, junior high, and high school, I don't think I'd be sitting where I am. I don't think I would have the career that I have. I think I probably would have been put into a small classroom and not treated very well just because that's how things were back then. Even looking back and knowing that I have autism, I remember specifically situations where I was in math class and I would ask my teacher a question, and I asked 3 times the same question, and she looked at me and said, "Do not ask another question. That is too much. I have other students." And it discouraged me from wanting to pursue math, and I really didn't take a math class after that. I found a way to get out of it. That was something that I was an expert at. I was an expert in school at doing the least amount of work and still passing. I passed high school by a thread.
Work
And
smarter, not harder.
I knew that I could do better, but I didn't care. I didn't understand why I needed to go to school. I skipped 60 days of school my senior year of high school. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. I sat at a table with other kids that didn't want to be at school and that didn't have friends. So we all kind of had like this little group of people that never hung out after school, but during school we kind of supported each other and were nice to each other. And I wasn't picked on per se in school. I just knew that I didn't fit in with these other kids. And I would not have wanted the teachers and the principals and the support staff there to know that I had autism, because I don't think that it would have turned out well for me. It really would have made it worse. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a great answer, and I really appreciate that you gave the context of how things have changed since now and from when you were in school too. And I always point this out from my experience as a lawyer. So a lot of the supports and things that we have now didn't really start showing up until the 90s. That with the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the reformed version of what is now the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, or IDEA, that its predecessor was in the 70s and was not nearly as comprehensive. So those of us who are in my generation and the current students grew up with all these extra protections and supports legally available to us. So you probably would have had a very different experience just based on what was available and what was federally mandated, just kind of a more objective take on it. And with that, I actually want to talk to Mark about his experiences and how, Stephen, sorry, my bad. And I want to talk about how teachers have supported you when you were younger, because you're a current student, and what that's like being a student here on ISU's campus, and what has helped you succeed in school, and how you manage being a neurodivergent person in an academic environment.
Yeah, so for most of my life, even through freshman year of college, I was undiagnosed, but I still had teachers that knew me way too well, and they knew that I probably couldn't do a whole entire reading and then answer questions right after it. But they knew what worked for me, and they basically would not sugarcoat it, but give me the same task just differently, where here's a little paragraph that we're going to work through, and now we're going to answer one question about it. And it would just be a conversation instead of me having to write down all my answers, because my brain would move faster than I could write. Like, the answers are there, just not getting down onto paper. So a lot of my professors and teachers growing up knew that about me, and they were able to do that for me. But then when you go to the math side, and I'm very gifted in math, so they would also be giving me different questions, but those questions would be stuff that college students would be doing, and I was doing that in high school. And they were like, okay, this is just how your high school education is going to go. Coming into like freshman year of college, whole new atmosphere, didn't really know what college life was like, took one class over the summer just to started learning how college work gets done. To this day, I still can't write an academic college paper, but most of my professors are fine with me literally just writing down my train of thought, and like literally everything is still there that they need for me to still succeed in their subject. What was the second question?
Oh, and how you manage your neurodivergent traits within the academic environment.
Yeah, so obviously I like things when there's 5 million things going on. I don't like it when there's one little thing. Either it has to be completely silent or there needs to be 4 to 5 things going on. The running joke is when I do homework, I have the one headphone out, so I'm usually watching some sports game because I love watching sports. I'm having a conversation with friends while doing my math homework while also thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner later that night.
Sounds about right.
So that's just like my normal homework, school life, and just how I manage my neurodivergent traits. A lot of people know that they shouldn't just be poking me because that's also just something I hate. But they also know that I love giving hugs. So they know how to get around like still being very good friends and what I need at certain points. And just being in an academic environment, even my classmates have picked up on, without me even telling them, that there's something different. And there's stuff during like group projects that I can do, and there's other stuff that I can't do.
Thank you so much for that. So before we eventually transition to the next part of our panel, there's something that seems to be a common theme amongst all of your experiences, and you've mentioned lots of people who are supportive and simply just get it, whether it's other neurodivergent people, teachers, family, colleagues, managers, direct reports, whoever it may be. And I think that having that support system of community is so, so vital, no matter who it is. So each of you has shared a little bit about your support system, which is fantastic, and how they've helped you. And on top of that, is there anything that any of you feel was a strategy or support as well that was really helpful that our audience would benefit from knowing about? And whoever feels like saying words, you are more than welcome to.
I can go ahead and go first on this one. I would say that one of the main things that has helped me is my wife. And I don't know if there's a lot of people that can say their spouse is the main person that has helped them. Maybe there are. I don't know. Do your spouses help you a lot? Is that something you rely on? I really rely on my wife. She has pushed me so hard to succeed. When I met her, we were waiting tables together, and now I'm an account executive with one of the largest corporations in the world. And it's just so fulfilling to look back and just know that she's had my back this whole time. And more than half of this time was done without her even knowing that I was dealing with this. She just thought that I had ADHD and I had a hard time paying attention to things, and that I would just get unnecessarily upset about things that other people didn't. And then wham, one day I'm diagnosed as autistic, and it just clicked with her as well. And she's been an even better support system for me. She was up early this morning encouraging me, telling me that she was so proud of me. I also have an amazing therapist that I see twice a month, and she's autistic as well, so she really understands the experience that I'm living through. And then with work, as I told you earlier, the manager that I have now is one of the greatest women that I've ever met in my life. And I felt comfortable telling her that I was autistic within, I think, about a month of working there. And I've never felt comfortable telling an employer that since, but I've only had 3 employers since I've been, 2 employers since I've been diagnosed. And the last one, they would not have received it well. They're just not the type of people that, quote, care about stuff like that. They just want you to get your job done and do it right and be there every day and perform. And if you have issues, take time off, use your vacation, go home. But they would hold it over your head. My manager now, if I call her and I say, look, I really need a break, I can just take that break. And to let the people in the audience know, one of the things that my therapist gave me is access to content from a lady named Megan Ann Neff, and she has really good like autistic burnout workbooks and little self-affirmation cards. And I'll say her name again. It's Megan Anna, and her last name is Neff, N-E-F-F. And her workbooks and like the little self-affirmation cards, like I have a hard time giving myself the credit that I deserve for getting where I'm at and giving myself credit. I don't know if that's something that other autistic people deal with, but I have a really hard time understanding how I made it where I am and giving myself credit for it. And Megan Anna Neff has little cards that I can read that say, you're doing a good job, things like that. It might sound childish, but it really helps me. And that is how I answer that question. And I appreciate everyone listening.
I think you touched really heavily on the imposter syndrome that so many of us deal with, especially because you are basically existing in a world that is not built with you in mind. And you're like, how do I even have any role in this? At least that's my vibe. I feel like I go through that a lot too. So very valid in speaking to my experiences. So switching gears, since we're talking a little bit about career and moving through life, because life happens beyond just childhood. My next question is for Marita, and how your understanding of your own neurodivergent traits really influenced your career choices and experiences in the workforce. I know you talked a little bit about your current career, kind of feeling what's going on there, but I'm curious to know a little bit more about how your own neurodivergent traits influenced where you're at.
Hopefully, if I was asked by a high schooler with autism who was asking like, what kind of job do you think would be good? That is something that I could do. I would say, with caution, if you can find a job that's related to a special interest, do it. The problem with that is that when you connect your special interest to the thing that literally puts food on the table, all of a sudden the pressure on keeping that special interest and maintaining a certain level of work becomes really, really high, which has been part of my problem kind of with nursing. That all of a sudden this thing that fills me up so much is this really heavy thing that it literally is what I need to do to stay alive. Mm-hmm. So that can be difficult. If you can find a job where it interests you enough that you can hop onto those little things and get excited about it, and if the job is also going to let you kind of run at your own pace in that way, like kind of once you hit a flow state and you're on a roll, so to speak, having a job with a flexible timeline can be really useful for that. So you can imagine why going back to like a hospital setting probably wouldn't be ideal for me, because a lot of times that timeline is totally out of my control, which can be really difficult. That's probably what I would say to someone who's trying to look for a job. Kind of the other part related to that is the idea that you do not always have to, just because, and it's kind of related to masking, just because something is the way that you've always done it before doesn't mean that it's the way that you have to do it now. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily a rigidity thing. It's a lot of people, when they get diagnosed, experience like skill regression. Like all of a sudden, when you realize that all of this is extra effort, poof, I can't do that extra effort anymore. Once I started realizing how much it was impacting my body, once I started paying attention to myself, mm-hmm. Wow, I actually can't do X, Y, Z anymore. Whether it's meal prep, like making and planning for a meal every night. And that's something that I always used to do. And all of a sudden, it's something that I'm not able to do anymore. And it means that when I go shopping, it means that I have to choose things that are kind of a little bit more pre-prepared sometimes, so that when I have that really rough day, I can just throw something in the oven and not have to rely on ordering. So just keeping that in mind, too related to working, I think is useful.
And kind of to follow up on that, because we talked about how autistic people can find things that they enjoy doing, and hopefully they don't burn out and all that good stuff and tie their special interests too deeply. I love how pragmatic you are about that, because I have tried tying my special interests to careers, and it made me absolutely want to never see those things again. Case in point, I was an illustrator, and I wanted to be an actual artist. And then, of course, I got soured off of going to art school because subjective grading, and I thought I would hate it. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to sell my work and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to have this pressure to do output. And then I didn't start drawing for fun again for a very long time. So a lot of this, it seems like it falls on us when we talk about this. But what would you tell the employers to create a more inclusive environment, so then, we can do anything, because autistic people don't have to just go into a couple neat little boxes of things we can do as real adult jobs?
Generally speaking, I've found that a manager that works best for me is the kind that is going to trust me to get the job done at the end of the day, and is less concerned about controlling how I get that done. And hey, to be honest, that boss who wants to have more control over those little things might also be autistic. There's a lot of us we're out there doing stuff and not knowing it. But having someone that trusts you can make a big difference. So getting to know your employees or your direct reports and getting to know what they're good at and using them to kind of guide what those next steps are within what your big picture vision is a good way to still get the job done while supporting a wide variety of different kinds of employees.
Thank you so much for that. So kind of to switch gears yet again, is I want to talk to Stephen for a minute, is that we are talking about all these things to kind of keep our lives together. And how do you navigate having all this time or managing your time? Especially, I know for me as another autistic person, I struggle a lot with executive functioning. I cannot stick to my schedule or routine as much as I want to. I mean, I had flight delays and things yesterday, and I'm like, the world is going to end. What am I going to do? The routine is not going according to plan because the crew didn't show up. There's weather, there's this, blah, blah, blah. So I imagine that executive functioning probably plays into this for so many of us, that you want to be able to start and stop and prioritize and do the thing. So how do you do the thing? How do you navigate your time between work and fun and school? Because you have a lot going on in your life.
Yeah, it's one of the hard dilemmas of, I know I want to get all of this done, and I know I need a schedule, but I don't want to stick to the schedule.
Yep.
One of the hard things that I have learned is that if my phone keeps on reminding me, it's going to get done eventually. And my friends make fun of me for all of this, but it's like, it works. My Google Calendar is literally filled with everything that I do on a constant basis. Like, it has when I eat breakfast, and then when I go to class, and when I'm at certain places, or when I need to go talk to a teacher, when I need to go do and like have tea with like some of my friends or coffee, and like there's like that good balance of like, okay, I have this free time that's not meant for school, that's meant just to interact with other people, and it's literally just me sending out texts to people to be like, hey, you want to grab coffee on Thursday? In fact, tomorrow morning I'm grabbing coffee with one of my friends. And like the school part kind of comes easy because it's like, I know how much money I'm paying, and I know if I don't go to class, my mom's going to yell at me, and that's kind of like the hard truth of, but I also enjoy my classes. Maybe my freshman and sophomore year, it wasn't as fun because I don't like learning about sociology, but I had to take the class. But now I'm more into the classes that I enjoy, and I have one class every single day now, and it's the easiest thing for me to go to those classes. And kind of going back into like the work aspect, it's more of like, I don't want to do the job. Like most of the time I'm working with friends or people that I know, and I enjoy doing the job. But most of the time it's looking at what that job can do for me later, which leads into me grabbing coffee with my friends. And that's why I'm able to do the work. And like trying to navigate all of them can get really stressful. It's not the easiest because there's projects, there's deadlines, there's this, that, the next thing. But professors are usually very understandable in what they say and what they want things to get done. Most of them will like wait till the next weekend, and it's just very helpful of how they help me navigate my time and when I can have fun and not.
Thank you for that. And talking about work and life and things, I want to ask Mark a couple of things. So you mentioned that you've had a lot of different jobs, from your professional career to waiting tables. You've done a little bit of everything. And you also mentioned that you didn't get a diagnosis until a little bit later. You mentioned that your current employer is super supportive, and you did disclose to the manager that you have, and you said she's one of the most fantastic women. So that was super awesome to hear about. But it probably might not have always been that way, since disclosure is so individualized based on each different situation that you're in. So I want to know how that has positively and negatively impacted your career progression and searching for jobs, since so many of us weigh these decisions on a daily basis. Do I tell my current manager I'm looking for a job? Do I tell somebody? Do I tell my colleagues? What do I do? It's a messy, complicated mess that's kind of a mental gymnastics. I struggle with it all the time. So how has that been for you? And also, what day-to-day supports and accommodations have helped you be successful?
So for the job search aspect, I would say that I try to look for a job where it involves taking care of others, or just taking care of others and making sure that everything that they want is being taken care of. Because growing up, I had to kind of mold into this people pleaser type of person, because otherwise I was kind of left on the outside. And I figured out at a very young age, if I can make people laugh and I can do something for them that they need done, I'm going to be of value for them. So career-wise, I kind of figured out like, hey, I can do a really good job of taking care of people. So I take care of accounts. ISU is one of the accounts I take care of. I take care of the University of Illinois, for example. And just being able to take care of them and showing them that, hey, I can get this done for you, it helps me a lot. And in terms of disclosing my diagnosis, as I said, I didn't know that I had autism for a long time. So former employees thought that I was just this guy that didn't want to do work and he's hiding in the bathroom so he doesn't have to do work, when in reality, I was waiting tables dealing with a lot of stressors. So taking that break to the bathroom was like, I can breathe, I can get back to the tables, and I can take care of them. And at the end of the month, they had a thing in the back. I worked at a restaurant that's here in Bloomington. It's called Distill. That was one that I worked at when I was older. They had a list in the back of who was highest at tips, and I was always number 1 or number 2 because I was really good with the tables. I really wanted to make them happy, and I also liked getting really big tips, so I tried to do a really good job. And in terms of day-to-day supports, my manager asked me, she's covering for me today for this, and she asked me what I was going to do, and I told her, and she took the opportunity to say, what can I do better? What do you need from me? And she actually felt kind of bad that she hasn't done more research on how to support someone that is autistic, and she said that she was going to do that for me. It's just the type of person that she is. And also being able to work from home, which I said helps so much than having to go into an office, because my last job, when I was hired, I was told that it would be hybrid and I'd be able to work from home, and it turned into always having to be in the office, and that led me to being like, I'm not working here anymore, and looking for another job the entire time I was on the clock with them. I might have taken advantage of them in that aspect, but they didn't treat me that well, so that's on them. And I have a new job that's 1,000 times better with the best support system. And let me see.
I'm so happy for
And something that Marita mentioned is something that I was actually just talked about last week. My manager told me that she really trusts me, and it meant so much, and she is not controlling at all. So that resonated with me a lot, and I wanted to make sure to reiterate that is super important, to trust people that are autistic. When they tell you that they're going to do something, they're probably going to do it, and they're probably going to do a really good job. It might take them a little bit longer. They might get it done right away, and there might be some things wrong, but they're going to want to correct it. At least I know that I'm going to. So giving them that extra space is something that I could recommend. And I think that's about it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And my next question is for Em, who is in grad school. And can you share more about your involvement in extracurricular clubs and activities? Because I know a lot of us, at least my experience when I was in grad school, is I wanted to do all the things. Especially I wanted to get all the student organization gold stars because I thought that would help me eventually get a job. And how have these different experiences shaped your career aspirations and what you're hoping to do going forward?
Yeah, so I was heavily involved in both undergrad and grad school currently. So with undergrad, I started out my involvement as the historian of the Genders and Sexualities Alliance on my campus. So that was really, it got me really involved with social justice on campus and such, and that really helped me kind of understand the value of diversity and such, which is something that plays into the work that I want to be doing after I graduate from my graduate program. And then I also worked at the school newspaper as a student employee, which taught me what I didn't want to do, because journalism is kind of very difficult, and it was not at all my pace. It was very demanding, and it involved a lot of doing things at random hours of the night. Even for student journalism, they still had us do stuff at random hours of the night, so that was really challenging. But I also got to get an idea of what I did and didn't want to do as an administrator, because I saw really good examples of administrators while working as a journalist, and also really bad examples of administrators as a journalist. My undergrad was at a school that's a little further away. And then as for grad school, one of the sort of compulsory things I'm involved in for my program is the Student Affairs Graduate Association. And it's essentially for my higher administration program. It is like the student organization that is like for our program, and so it's focused on like getting us to attend conferences and professional development kind of stuff. So being involved in that has been really helpful in terms of connecting with my program, and especially connecting with like the second years in my program. And then also, I am a member of a group here at ISU called Drag Royalty. It's a registered student organization for drag performers. So I am a drag king in my spare time, and that's sort of helped me like less with career things and more just getting involved with like the local campus community, and again getting involved with the queer community on campus. That's been really helpful. And then also as for like extracurricular stuff that isn't directly related to the school, I've been really heavily involved in a couple different professional organizations under the banner of like a larger professional organization for my field. But there's like there's this group called APAN, which is Asian Pacific American Network, and it's a network for people in my field that are of APITA descent, so Asian, Pacific Islander, Desi American. And that's been really helpful in getting me connected to that aspect of my identity and my community too. Those experiences have really kind of honed my interest in certain aspects of my field and helped me understand better like what I want to do in my future career and what I don't want to do. Thank you.
I love that you took a very logical approach to that. And I also love that we are kind of wrapping up our panel, and we all talked about community and support and self-advocacy in so many ways. So our final question is supposed to be something that we seem to have touched about just a lot of. So I'm going to ask you a different question. I know, shocker. Not to be that person, but we talk a lot about community. We talk a lot about the things that are hard for us. We talk about that we need accommodations, all that. So since we are in Autism Acceptance Month, and you should love and care about all the autistic people in your life, I want to ask each of you as a final thing to send us out with a little bit about joy, a little bit about the good things, because we all talked about special interests and things that we're excited about and passionate about. So just to help send us off, I want everyone to share just a little bit about their joy, about the things that are awesome in your life or the thing that makes you excited, just so we can get to know you and also have that energy going out throughout the day. Because sometimes so many of us have these great things going on or that we're thinking about that we don't often get to share enough about because the neurotypical people in the room don't want to hear about it. So we're going to let you have the floor to talk about all the things the neurotypical people don't usually let you talk about. Which means if you let me talk about this stuff, you will hear about my collection of handbags or you'll hear about my collection of Pokemon cards. So I am that person. I will happily talk to you about all these things for hours on end, and that is stuff that brings me joy, as does having this wonderful community of people to share with and meeting other autistic people. So happy to have our friends and panelists share a little bit about their joy instead of their stress and burnout and accommodations and needs for support. And supporting our joy is something you can all do.
So I guess I'll talk again, but so as for my joys, I have a lot of, like big and small joys going on. One thing that I mentioned in one of my classes for a sort of a cute joy that's happening for me lately is that ever since I started grad school, I've been having weekly lunches with my mom because she also works at ISU, like here at ISU. So I've been able to grab lunch with her basically every week, outside of like a couple times. But basically, that's been really helpful for my mental health. I get to, have a little chit chat with my mom. She's been a really important person in my life for support. And then also, I spend a lot of time with my partner, and that has made me really happy too, because they're also on the spectrum and they really get me. And so That's been a big source of joy in my life. And then also performing in drag, as I mentioned, has been a really big source of joy in my life. I actually have a couple shows coming up this month, but basically I'm very happy to have found a community of like-minded, performers and artists that really care to express themselves in certain ways. And also a lot of people in that group are also neurodivergent. So it's been really helpful to get to know all these other neurodivergent artists who really apply their differences to their art. And that's been a big source of joy for me lately. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. So this is supposed to end when? 10:30? Do you guys have until 2 p.m. so I can talk about all my special interests? So I really like that Em touched on her mom. Since getting diagnosed, me and my mom's relationship has gotten so much better because it helped me understand her a lot more. And I have gotten a lot of joy from hanging out with her, having her over for dinner and stuff like that. Sports are also a joy of mine, specifically NCAA basketball. My team, Illini, lost last week. So that wasn't very joyful, but it is what it is. I was looking today and I saw that the university is going to receive $4 million for how far they went in the tournament. So that's more money to spend on great players and bring them in next year. So I'm happy about that. One thing that I really take joy in is also collecting watches. I'm sure that not many people here probably care about that, but if you do, we can talk.
Can we talk later?
Yes, we absolutely can. Obviously, my wife and kids bring me a lot of joy. My success and seeing what it's been able to provide for them is a great sense of joy and pride. I like cars a lot as well. So doing well at work hopefully will afford me the ability to get a dream car soon. And my dog, Willow, who I was going to try to sneak in here and say that she was my emotional support dog so she could sit up here, but I didn't have a vest to put on her, so that's not a possibility. And my cats as well, but if I brought them, I think that one of them would be back here hiding and extremely scared, and the other one would be talking to everyone and hanging out. So those are the things that bring me joy. And again, I would be able to sit up here and talk for 5 hours about them, but it would be model numbers of watches and cars and how fast they go and the different movements in the watches. And I don't think that everyone here wants to hear about that. So I'll go ahead and just stop.
Our favorite horologist. Yes. Moving right along.
Some of the joys in my life are literally just seeing my friends happy and
Aww.
making sure that they're doing everything that they can do to the best of their ability. Reasons why I grab coffee with them every single day, or once a week, not every day. But why I invest so much time into who they are, just because I enjoy what we have in common, and that's literally just our friendship. Sometimes it's as nerdy as we both were math majors, and we can just talk about math for hours, which I won't bore you about math. But sports is one of the hugest things in my life. For all my friends that like soccer, most people don't like soccer. I can watch soccer for a whole entire day. And there's other stuff that's also boring, like playing chess or watching chess. I find so much joy in that. And it's just finding joy in the little things. And literally sitting out on the quad for me is one of my favorite things to do when it's nice out right now. Probably not the best thing,
No.
but during the summer when I was here, and I didn't have work, that's what I would do. Literally spend 3 hours on the quad.
Now that it's spring, and it is still technically spring, it's just Illinois spring. This is how it works. I forgot one of my favorite animals is the American coot. If you've ever been to White Oak Park or Miller Park, any kind where there's a body of water, and if you ever notice there's a small black-looking duck-like thing, it's not a black duck. It's an American coot, and it has a cute little white beak, and its feet are dinosaur feet with these grabbies. They're insane. And when it swims, it bobs its head, which is how I got into the first place. But they're starting to come back. And so yesterday when I was at Miller Park, I was walking with my husband and our dog, and we were coming up across the bridge, and there were 10 coots that happened to be up underneath the bridge. And we scared them. So basically I was 3 feet away from a coot. which was extremely joyful and exciting for me. I like coots.
Thank you for sharing. And I am so glad to see everybody in a good mood at the end of this panel, because I know that sometimes being up here takes a little bit of bravery and courage and vulnerability. So I wanted to thank each of our panelists for sharing a little bit about themselves, their lives, their struggles, their joy, and everything in between. So a hearty thank you to all of them, and a thank you to all of you for taking the time to really listen and learn from people with lived experience and taking that energy throughout our day together. So thank you to everybody for being here, and thank you again for sharing your stories.
All right, there's a couple things that I forgot to say when we were doing our introduction. Is there a slide on that presentation that is like room logistics? Well, I'll just fly. Bathrooms are located in 2 different locations, right across the hall and then down the concourse on the other side. So that's where you can access the restrooms. There is a parking validation card in the back of your name tag. So as you leave the parking deck lot, hand that to the parking guy. That will give you free parking. Don't lose it. Or if you do, come back to our registration desk. And then on the back of your name tag also, there should be a pink, I believe, sticker for food if you paid for food. So as we get into that food line, you'll just have to flash that. There's also, for some of you who had different restrictions, there is a little note in there to let the server who might be in the room at the time to know that you need gluten-free or a specific type of food. And am I missing any of the other updates? No. There should be directional signs to some of the breakout rooms. We will also have staff that have white lanyards to help direct you to our breakout sessions. One of the breakout rooms is in Ballroom 1, which is the room right behind you to the right, facing the west and that direction, south. There is Old Main is on the first floor, and then the other breakout rooms are in Prairie 1 and 2. You'll have to go up, and when you see Qdoba, you will turn past Qdoba, and then Prairie 1 and 2 are kind of towards the back. Don't be fooled and go into Prairie 3. There won't be anyone in there, and the doors will probably be locked. There should be a sign directing you to gain access to Prairie 1 and 2. So you can also hit the vendor fair again. Vendors will be open during the break. They will also be open and available for you to access during lunch. You have an hour at lunch, so hopefully you can eat and then also hit those exhibitors again. And then we'll welcome you back here in the afternoon for the parent panel and keynote. So thank you. And again, thank you to our lived experience panel. You guys are awesome.